Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Welcome to our water meeting tonight. On behalf of the Ad Hoc Water Committee, we want to welcome you to this meeting, and we're really looking forward to collaborating with you and gathering input from the community, because it's really important in terms of going forward and having a decision that people feel good about. And there's so many bright, creative people in this community that we really want to hear your ideas and your input and concerns. I just want to make a couple, hopefully everybody got a copy of the agenda. And I just want to make a couple notes on the agenda itself. There are two different places where it's marked discussion. And I just wanted to let you know that the engineer is going to be speaking for a period of time. There's going to be a discussion period, and that's going to be more focused on what he's addressing and kind of his role in the village. And then later on, there's going to be another discussion period where it's going to be more open and people can talk about whatever they want to talk about as a community. So just to let you know that. And also, we are videotaping this meeting to make it more accessible to people who have to leave early, who can't make it, or maybe some of you want to review what happened because you weren't clear about something. And we want to encourage you and welcome you to provide input after the meeting. And if you have further, sending it to our emails on the bottom of your forms and on the sign-in sheets, we had you sign in because we like to keep the loop going in terms of communication. Let me see, I think that's about it. First, my name's Denise McDonald, and I'm a member of the Ad Hoc Committee. And this is also, of course, Gary Putnam, who's on the board. And then also Matthew Coldrick, who's a member of the Ad Hoc Water Committee. And lastly, I'm going to introduce Mike Harrington, which a fair number of you probably already know. He's the engineer who will be speaking tonight. And I also want to express appreciation to him because he's volunteering his time tonight to come and speak with us. The village is not paying for that, and we really appreciate it. So I'm going to turn it over to Mike.
All right. First thing I'll point to are the three drawing boards. Basically what we've shown tonight are just the existing conditions. None of our proposed improvements are on there because we realize this is a brainstorming session about possibly redirecting the focus of the project. Feel free to step up and look at the maps if you need to help you come up with questions and whatnot. But what the map shows is the village boundary. In the orange line, the village service area for water is the blue squiggly within the village. The red dot is the water storage tank. A little black square next to the red dot is where your water comes from currently, from Clifton Park Water Authority. So there's that 8-inch line that crosses the Northway. And then I guess I should walk over here and point to things.
Who's the line that crosses Northway in the street?
Right
there,
here.
okay.
Sorry.
It's okay, no worries.
Other items of relevance are there's a purple line all around. That's essentially the Clifton Park Water Service area currently. Relevant to potential options that we have besides the plan is the 30-inch Saratoga County water main that comes through here and then heads over to the Tech Park. And also of interest is the yellow line, which is the Saratoga Water Services boundary to the north. They're a private water company that serves essentially Malta east of the Northway and part of the town of Stillwater. I guess with that said, that explains that map. But again, feel free to take a look at that. Basically my first task here is just to identify and give a brief explanation or summary of what the current plan involves. As I think most of you know, the village has been cited by the Department of Health for having excessive disinfection byproducts. that includes both trihalomethanes and also haloacetic acids. That problem has come about since the village's connection to the Clifton Park, it has come about since Clifton Park Water Authority started buying water from Saratoga County Water Authority, which was about 5 years ago. Prior to that, you've been a customer of Clifton Park Water Authority for coming on 20 years. Prior to that, you had no problems with these contaminants. So, 4 or 5 years ago, actually no, it was January 2013, we had a public meeting here, and Don Austin of the Clifton Park Water Authority put together a PowerPoint presentation that he had been using with his customers to explain the situation. At that point, pretty much the culprit was Saratoga County Water Authority. Their treatment plant did not yet have the components, namely granular activated carbon, that would remove what are called precursors for these disinfection byproducts. It's the organic matter in the water. So ultimately, and over the course of 4 years, Saratoga County Water Authority added carbon filters to their plant up on the Hudson, and they essentially got all their big customers in full compliance with the current regulations. That left the smaller customers like Round Lake. I think Stillwater may still have been having some problems lately. Pretty much the end users of the water were still having some problems. I think we are understanding now that the Water Authority has done as much as they're going to do in terms of treating their water, which leaves us, unfortunately, to solve the problem here locally. One of the known culprit or assumed culprit for causing the problem is the rechlorination of your water just before it goes into the storage tank that you have. You get water from Clifton Park that's about half the limit. Let's just use round numbers. John has to rechlorinate to maintain chlorine residual by Department of Health standards at the end of your water system, and that application of chlorine combined with 5 or 6 days of storage that are in your storage tank essentially create more of these DBPs. The tank is both a curse because of that, but it's also a blessing because it does provide, and this is one of the approaches we've used in our report, it provides you a vessel to treat. One of the ways to lessen the disinfection byproducts is to essentially volatilize them and strip them out of the water and release them to the atmosphere. That is done with a system that, in conjunction with a mixer that continually mixes the water in the tank. That mixer will be on the bottom. The primary worker in this system is an aeration system that basically aerates water at the top of the tank. And then the third component is a ventilator that pulls the contaminants that have been volatilized out of the tank. So that treatment is likely to, let me step back a second. You folks are pretty much you're on and off in terms of compliance. The key parameter that you seem to be having trouble with are the trihalomethanes. Their limit is 80 parts per billion. This method is likely to get you down in the 40 or 50 range. It's not going to eliminate all of them. It'll do a decent job in keeping you into compliance and not have your operator, John, as I've used the term before, looking out the back window waiting for the regulators to catch up to them. So it would give you headroom, but it won't get that number down to zero. At the end of the treatment, you'd be drinking water that's very similar to what Clifton Park is providing you. It gets you back to that point where pretty much all the folks in Clifton Park are drinking water at that level. The other option mentioned in our report that is a much more fail-safe approach would be use of granular activated carbon. I mentioned that previously. That is what the county uses up at their treatment plant. It's also what was set up on a temporary basis. I don't know, I think it was a couple of years ago when Clifton Park basically said, we're not buying your water anymore, and bought more from one of their other sources. And during that period, these temporary filters were set up. During that period, you guys did great in terms of your testing. Remember that? And I think also during that time, I think they switched back to all our well water, and you did great during that time period too. But I guess what I'm pointing to is based on the experience with the county, based on the experience when those temporary filters were set up. These are the granular activated carbon filters. We're very confident that those are going to do a great job in stripping out any THM or DBPs that have formed, but it'll also strip out those precursors that, when John adds chlorine back, would reform into DBPs. So again, theoretically it should get you down to zero, but I would say you're probably going to go from 80 to 20 or thereabouts. Both of these methods that I've described would be pilot tested prior to implementation. That has been figured in the plan. But as our report says, it's highly unlikely that both of these options would be needed. And I would say that if we proceeded in the direction that we've identified, that you would, we pilot test the one or both of the options, and then make decisions from there as a first part of the final design. That covers the treatment end of what we looked at. But what happens when you develop a project is you take a look at the whole system. So during that activity of looking at the whole system, we talked to John, understood other problems and difficulties the system was having, and identified some other pieces of work that should be done or should be considered if you're doing a capital project. The way the funding works, if you get scored for all different components, and if all those aggregate scoring gets you up to a number, it helps you get funded. So the more little problems you can identify and correct with a project, the better off you can sometimes be. So in those categories of other things we picked up were the New York Ave distribution system area has very low pressures, somewhere around 25 pounds per square inch. The standard is you're supposed to maintain 35 at all times. So that is something that could be corrected in a project. The method that we have identified, because our current plan of attack involves heaping the tank, is to install a booster pumping station in that area. It would be a small booster pumping station with pump pressure 30 pounds or so, and provide residents in that area with acceptable pressures. One thing I'll point out is those low pressures are dictated by the height of that storage tank. That storage tank is what, 70?
50 or 60 foot. 60
feet high. It's at a certain elevation, and based on the ground elevation on New York Ave, it only gives you the 25 pounds per square inch that is experienced there. Yeah, and that's, you know, physics won't allow us to get any more without a pumping system. We'll come back to the other options related to New York Ave later. But that is a problem that we are suggesting that we consider fixing if the village does a project and gets funded for a project. Another option, another deficiency that John has found recently within the past couple of years is all of the bolts for the valves that were put in the project 20 years ago, unfortunately, were not made of stainless steel. It was just the AWWA standard at the time had not converted it, the standard valving bolts, to be stainless steel. And due to some corrosive soils in the area, John has found that a lot of these bolts are corroded. I think the valves in general work, and
Everything's in
the
operation.
fix is you've got to dig things up and replace the bolts.
Are those bolts throughout the system or just up at the tank?
Those are throughout. And when you guys, it was the project that replaced all the piping in the village,
Right.
unfortunately, the AWWA standard at the time did not specify stainless
It's not
steel.
all valves, it's hit and miss, and going around locating them, because at that time, we were in the middle of,
The
there was no
transition.
standard, and some had, and some did not.
Okay, all right. So again, we've set a budget. We've set a budget for each of these items, and the way the funding works is if, you know, whether you do one of them or 100 of them, you kind of get the credit for that item. So New York Ave, fixing a pressure issue will get us a certain number of points. Fixing distribution systems, they don't give you a lot of points for, but if you get funded because of other things, it might be a good way to fix this problem. So that's why it's in there.
While you're in the current plan, including the tank, I know we're almost at the limit for haloacetic acids. Now, aeration, as I understand it, won't bring those down. So we still are going to be liable to have problems with that. So are we going to be required then to have the carbon filters to take care of
That's a
that?
good point, and it would all shake out in the pilot testing. And that is the reason we want to make sure we have enough budget to solve the problem. So what we have are both the aeration system and also the filters.
So it may or may not be necessary.
Right, and of course the benefit, you could end up with a system with both, and the benefit would be that you would put less strain on those filters and need to change them out less. So it's not totally belt and suspenders. It could optimize the operation of the filters in that vein. So, but a lot of it would just shake out in the pilot testing. So some of the other miscellaneous items, things like replacing the generator that John has up at the chlorine station, mostly housekeeping stuff that is just added on to the project, nothing huge, but the way this funding works is you kind of need to identify it in a report, whether it's on a cost estimate or actually written up in great detail. As long as it's in this report, it can be deemed fundable if the project gets funded. And let me do just a quick explanation of where we are in the funding process. We have submitted to what's known as the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund for potential grant funding. If you don't get the points enough to get grant funding, the program will give you loan funding at what they deem market rates, which is currently 3 or 4%. Clearly, we'd rather get 60% grant. And again, as much as everyone's concerned about the DBP issue, unfortunately, it does not get you high enough points right out of the gate to get you funded, because it's a chronic versus an acute health risk. You know, if you had wells that, or a water source that was high in bacteria or something, or one well when you needed two, you've already got your funding on this. So, I know it's a tough pill to swallow, is because, you know, the state's making you do something to meet this limit, yet they're not there to pay for the problem. At least they may not be. The second piece of the funding picture is the sister, I'm calling it the sister funding program of the DWSRF, is what's called the New York State Water Grant Program. It uses the same sort of criteria, and it's kind of administered by the same folks. It's just there's a bigger pot of money, and the scoring on the project can be lower, and you can still get funded 60% grant. So we're reasonably hopeful that you guys can get some grant funding. The scoring doesn't weigh as heavily on income anymore, so you guys have higher median income than a lot of the communities we work with, and sometimes they get a few extra points because of a lower income. Unfortunately, that's not the case here. So, last component of what we identified as part of the project that we board decided to submit for this funding is a connection to, or at least a budget for a secondary connection to the Saratoga Water Services system. Now, you could change out Saratoga Water System Services with Saratoga County Water Authority if you wanted. But basically the rationale used in the report is, I know that the Saratoga Water Service, which is the yellow on these boards, their service area grows regularly as developers do projects and extend their water distribution area. So my thought when I wrote the report, now this may not hold any water today with all the recent discussion here, but my idea in the report was that knowing that that's happening, by the time you guys do a project, they could be marched down Route 9. And the other thing in play here is that Route 9 corridor got reopened or got opened up for commercial development fairly recently. And that's the type of development that grows the Saratoga Water Services system. So my thinking was that over the course of a couple of years, that system would get close enough where you guys could economically or with reasonable cost connect to them as a backup supply. Of course, the discussion and a lot of thinking here tonight is probably going to be why don't we just connect to them as a primary and do away with some of the other stuff, and we can get talking about that again later. But I did include basically 1,000 feet of main and all the required metering and pressure reducing vaults and that sort of thing to get us started up Route 9. And I budgeted 1,000 feet. Again, the way this funding works, that gives you a line item. If that you decide to forego maybe some of these bolt replacements, you could go farther up Route 9 with the budget that we've identified here. Or another possibility is everyone in the room convinces the village board that is what they want to do. The board could direct us to possibly add that component into this water grant application, which needs to be submitted by essentially next Friday for me. So it's not. The good news is the water grant application mostly uses the information that's in the application that's already submitted. So it's as close to filling out a paper application with 3 or 4 pages as you get these days, because a lot of the homework has already been done. So, again, sure.
Just looking at the maps you have up here, how far is 1,000 feet? I see the yellow line, and I see where our squiggly blue line is. How much is 1,000 feet connecting to this, roughly? Along Route 9, I'm looking.
Right, I think this is Goldfoot. 1,000 feet got us about this far.
Okay, all right.
All right. Again, it was a placeholder, a line item. It doesn't get you all the way to even the main that runs through Maltaville.
And how far up you have to go to connect? Is it where the yellow line is? Or
Yes, that's just shy of a mile.
If it became a primary source, would you have to have a new storage tank or a different location for storage?
If you retain 2 connections to different systems, I think the health department will allow you to bypass your storage tank. And again, there's a couple caveats to this, and that is we have to make sure that your fire flows are not diminished in any way that is deemed significant. And that's a local decision primarily. That really, the health department probably won't say a lot about that if all on the local level agree. But your tank right now, it provides both a volume. It provides a volume of water to fight fires, but it also allows a much greater peak flow to reach the fire than if you were relying on that main across the northwest. Because that's only an 8-inch main, and I believe it's a polyethylene main, which means it's even smaller than 8-inch. So it could be very restricting. If you made the second connection to either Saratoga Water or Saratoga County Water Authority, I doubt we'd still need to check, but I doubt there would be any problem with getting you enough water. And if a water main break occurred in Clifton Park and they couldn't feed you any water, you'd at least have water coming from the other direction, or vice versa.
Could you, if you had 2 hookups, could you keep the water tower going without using it for drinking water? So that you don't have to do any aeration?
Good point. I actually, we were talking about this yesterday, and I actually, whether these systems want to run this way or not, I know plenty of systems that actually run that way. Their tank just stays full all the time and water doesn't go in or out of it. This would be that situation, except there'd be a valve. And if a fire occurred, you could have it there as turn it on for storage, or there could be an automatic valve that only opened when, these are called altitude valves typically, that only opened when there was a drop in pressure and there was a demand for, you would probably have to go to a boil water. I don't see any really a way around that if that tank got used, but that's certainly technically possible.
If you don't mind, I'd like you to go back a little bit about these disinfectant byproducts. How long has the U.S. been testing for those? Do you have a feel for that?
70s, I think.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't.
10 years, 50 years?
No, I would say it has to be 20 plus at this point, because this is the second, we're in the second level at least of, the numbers used to be higher, now they're a little bit lower, and maybe they'll trend a little bit lower, but nothing ever goes back up. So,
are these are the trihalomethanes absorbed through the skin?
Has anyone done research on it? I mean, I think it's when you drink it and
No,
you inhale it as well.
It's drinking, it's inhaling the chloroform, which is aerosolized in the shower, but it's also dermally absorbed through the skin and baths.
Could this
Or in doing washing or even in swimming pools.
This part of the presentation is mostly for engineering stuff that an engineer could answer. We can talk about that stuff after the engineering presentation, okay?
Sorry, I wish, yeah, maybe I should know, but I all right.
Who do you work for?
Lamont Engineers.
So you're an independent contractor? You're not working for the Water Authority or any governmental agency?
No, I've worked for the village since 2011 on various projects.
Okay. Now, one other thing here. Did all our problems start when we switched over to the Saratoga connection?
Absolutely. Well, when you call it the Saratoga, it's, and I kind of fumbled through this when I went through it, but what it was in 2011 or 12, Clifton Park Water Authority started buying from Saratoga County Water Authority. Your problem started immediately after that. There was no
So
no
up to this
question.
point, we've been assured for the past 5 years that our water's fine. Anybody we ever talked to said, oh, no problem, your water's, but how come I keep getting letters from the state saying it's not fine? Oh, well, don't pay any attention to them. These are the responses I kept getting. And I don't know where you're looking for the funding, but I think we should be going after, I pay $600 a year for bad water. And so I've been doing this for 5 years, 6 years. If every house did that, we'd have plenty of funding if we went to the authority and got our money back.
Well, that's 4 or 5 years ago. That's where all the discussion was, which was
Well, that
you
would make the whole
guys,
thing.
the water authority needs to come up with a solution, and they did what they needed to do for their big customers, and they saw that you have the tank here and said that's causing their problems, and they stopped when they got Clifton Park in compliance. That's my opinion of it.
That gets a picture. Just another love canal.
The Saratoga, I get a little confused because you said when Clifton Park went to Saratoga, we had trouble. Is that different than the yellow area?
Absolutely. Yellow is Saratoga Water Services,
It's
Inc.
different.
In Malta, private water company, started in the 80s to serve the Luther Forest, and then it's grown
And they
since then.
have good numbers of that.
They are a groundwater source, so they're in the 5 range compared to 80. And full disclosure, I don't want this to come out in some back room somewhere. I worked for Saratoga Water Services since 2003. So I don't know, does that put me in that category that you were worried about?
I'm just there, I'd say. Everybody told me it was good and I was paying for it.
No,
I didn't think it was good, but I paid the money.
Yeah.
But I put water in the sink to shave in the morning, and I can't see the bottom of the sink. It's all gray. Now it comes up with the bolts that are faulty. Does that go to household spigots and as well being rotted away by whatever?
No, because that corrosion is external. That's like a soil-based corrosion.
Yeah, but the
What
water
do you do on lead and copper? You've done
No
fine.
problem.
Yeah, so lead and copper testing, which is the prime indicator of corrosive water, if you're doing okay with that, you're probably okay.
So the options you laid out, today we get the water through Clifton Park, it has to go into the holding tank, which is where the increase occurs, because what they're feeding us is in the pores. The other options you mentioned about 40, sorry. I never looked at that. The other options of connecting with Saratoga or the other one bypasses the tank, it comes directly in, we wouldn't have to use the tank any longer unless we decided to keep it for emergency purposes, correct?
Correct. And the reason, I know I've said this to a few people, but I think it's before everyone was here. 4 or 5 years ago, when the county water authority was seen as the devil, the source of all this, I mean, we would have been laughed out of the room if we said just connect to them directly, because I think at that time we were hearing that Global Foundries was having problems, and they had to do a bunch of stuff, and everyone kept saying, well, the more people that use water, the problem's going to go away. It just didn't seem to be happening quick enough. So that option, which may be more of an option today, it wasn't around 3 or 4 years ago in terms of just zipping up to Maltaville and connecting to them.
Excuse me for asking another question yet again. Is there yet another option, which is to use water which is under our soil right here to put wells, because there's a lot of standing
How
water?
did we forget talking about this? Yes, that was the first on the list here.
Yes, our alternative water sources.
Okay, groundwater. Groundwater is the source of water for Saratoga Water Services. One of their well fields is off of Knapp Road. I should know exactly where it is, but I think it's right there. That is not their biggest source currently. Their biggest source is over on Cold Spring Road in the town of Stillwater. The combined capacity of 4 wells off of Knapp Road is just shy of 350 gallons a minute. Those were developed back when the original Luther Forest system was developed. But again, they're not the most prolific of their system. The much bigger wells just south of Saratoga Lake is the primary water for the Saratoga water system. But with that said, knowing that there's wells there and talking to a local hydrogeologist from Clifton Park, Eric Hansen, the name of his firm is Hansen Van Vliet. He did the work for Saratoga Water Services, and he's done a lot of work in the area. He's very knowledgeable about groundwater. That is something that if folks want to pursue that seriously, what's the normal first step in a groundwater evaluation is what's called a phase 1 study. It's essentially a desktop study where hydrogeologists will look at all the data that is available, including well logs, maps of the underground geology and whatnot, and through that they can kind of identify some recommended drilling sites. That first phase is very cost appealing. It's only about $5,000, but it really won't get you anything. It'll get you targets to drill. The only way that you can possibly get anything out of an exploration program is to do some test drilling. That next phase will probably cost you around $50,000. And all it will do is give you the possibility that you can get enough water out of the ground. You'll be able to sample the water to make sure it's of reasonable quality, that you don't have to treat it for iron or sulfur or anything you don't want to be drinking. So if you're doing the math, you're up to 50,000, and all you know is you might have a possibility. You might have some target, a target well site. Beyond that is what's called phase 3. Phase 2 is the test drilling, or the small diameter test drilling. Phase 3 is the test production well phase. That is where you actually put a well that turns out to be your production well ultimately. You drill it, you develop it, you test pump it. The regulation is for at least 72 hours so that you know what the well can deliver. You make sure it does not impact other local wells, and then presumably you pick a spot that wouldn't be impacting other wells, plus most people have municipal water, so that may not be that big of an issue. But it's part of what DEC and DOH want in terms of a well development program. I just finished working on a project now where they have spent $200,000 total in getting to a point where they've got their test production wells. So that just gets you, in this case, $200,000 in that ballpark would get you 2 wells sticking out of the ground. And depending on where they are, you'd have 500, 1,000 or more feet of pipe to connect to your system. You have to build a well house, probably a generator, chlorination facilities and that sort of thing, and hopefully you don't have to treat it. I'm not trying to sound negative with this, I just want everyone to realize what the true costs are. We do well projects all the time. I think by the time you're done, assuming you could find a site, you might be on the order of $750,000 in developing that site. And that's with a normal size pipeline to connect to your current system.
And what is the confidence level you wouldn't have to treat that water based on other wells in the area?
You get some insight into that with the phase 1 study, because they would say, all right, these are the well logs and this is the known quality the quality of the water in these locations, and there is a correlation with types of formation and the likelihood of providing water that's of good quality, or maybe sulfur, or I think Eric mentioned the possibility, I think south of the village, of wells that produce almost like Vichy-like water. So there can be some funky stuff sometimes.
Unless I'm wrong, it's actually what seems to be a well flowing in the village right now. Has anybody explored that site?
I haven't. It may have been looked at 20 years ago, before the decision was made to run the pipe across the Northway. I know there was a brief mention of groundwater exploration in a report that was done. I don't know if they looked at local wells at that time. It almost sounded like the report just kind of jumped over to the project that connected across to Clifton Park. So, but that is something that would be done in the phase 1 study.
There's water flowing about 50 yards north of Lee, is out at the base of the telephone pole that some village residents have in fact already tested. And it seems clear it's simply running out of there into the ground, suggesting to me there's water there. I mean, as we're sitting here, unless it dried up, I went over there and looked at it. Had to get tested. Somebody knows how to get it tested. Fine. So I'm wondering if anybody's going to look at that.
Well, the only person it makes sense to look at is if you hired a hydrogeologist to do and you know, that's the thing, is you'd say, when you set up his scope, you'd say, all right, make sure you look at that and determine if it's remotely viable. I mean, the other thing to consider is, this isn't like a well at a house that's in the country. You need 100 foot of ownership around the well. You need 200 feet of control, where you have complete control over what's done on the property. So maybe there's that vein, if that extends somewhere out where there's less population, it could be viable.
There's nobody within those distances you just mentioned.
Saratoga County Sewer.
I think you have to be like 50 feet from a sewer line.
Every time you mention money, you keep saying you, and I hope it's editorial. But we didn't do anything wrong, and all of a sudden we're being saddled with something between $1 million and $1 million, and which may or may not work. And why is that happening to us?
Well, I think right there is maybe why nobody jumped on doing something 5 years ago, because it was like...
No, that we were assured the water was fabulous 5 years ago. We did something about it. We said, is this water any good? We said, yeah, it's great.
I can't speak to the language that comes with those letters is something the health department provides the village, and
we only have 240 houses. Now, this is going to be an expensive proposition per house, because you keep talking. Unfortunately, you probably won't get a grant for this. You get a grovel for a grant for that, et cetera, et cetera. The money's not coming like you say. It didn't come to Love Canal, didn't come to Flint, Michigan. The money's, I don't see where all this money comes from, except out of our pockets.
Well, that's an excellent point, and that's usually the starting point of most projects.
How many years they've been going on?
Yeah.
Ours hasn't. But
And-
it's got enough that it's pretty annoying to me.
And the wish, let's call it what it is. It may be a wish list that I've got here on this budget. But if you do get the funding, you may want to do it if the loan part.
And the politics that are in motion today are not going to give us any government funding. It's not in the budget. This is the part they're cutting.
They are talking
about what's gone. There is no more money.
They are talking whether it's real or not of putting a lot into the infrastructure, and until they fund projects like this, then it's meaningless talk at that point.
That's what I'm suggesting to you. Why are you giving us all this stuff?
But we could, let me just speak to that one second. You could back in, if you don't get funded, you can back into a very modest project. I still agree with you that you didn't cause this. This was a change that Clifton Park made because they got into an agreement with Saratoga County Water Authority. You were doing fine drinking Clifton Park water for 15 years. You had never had a problem. So you guys did nothing to create this issue. But it happened, and the conditions of your system infrastructure, which was pre-existing, led to this problem to be exacerbated. So, all right,
Just looking at the two connection possibility, connecting to the north, you said you already put some funding in for about 1,000 feet.
right. Again, as a line item placeholder, we went from Goldfoot 1,000 feet.
You said it might be a mile to connect all the way?
Yes, it's just shy of a mile.
Do you know the amount, here's what I wanted to compare. The amount of money for 1,000 feet, I wanted to get just a sense, just very, very roughly vague, of what it would cost to go the full mile compared to what we're gonna spend on fixing the tank. In other words,
It's going to be it's very close. 5,000-ish feet, $200 a foot because of the Route 9 corridor. You're talking about $1 million in construction, and if you did nothing else, the project would be about the same size.
One thing though to note too is that we wouldn't be able to get at, I'm asking this too, and I may be wrong about it, but the Clifton, we have a contract that won't expire. We still have a contract for water for Clifton Park for another 2 years, so the development may bring it down closer where the cost actually may diminish, wouldn't you think? If once we could switch over, like if you did Saratoga Water Services, it might actually cost less to run the pipe up because the development would have moved down in 2 years.
And they might also be working with Maltaville to provide infrastructure.
And we're also, FYI, is that we as a committee are meeting with Saratoga Water Services next week, the one that has the low THMs at like 5 or whatever, to talk to them about what they know is coming down the pike in terms of development, but also the figures they're working up with Maltaville where we might be able to combine some type of thing. So we're doing a little more research on that. We can let you know about that.
Let me speak to that issue again. If you made the plan to connect to Saratoga Water tomorrow, and it was I'm just explaining what would happen with the system. You would likely petition to take your tank out of service. You would still maintain your connection with Clifton Park. The contract, I would say you would renew it because you want to keep a second connection.
Okay.
Because you've got a main coming down Route 9. What if that breaks? And the other piece is, I would say that you keep both service connections active, because as John knows, if you leave stuff just sitting there and doing nothing, none of the valves are going to work. And so at a minimum, that Clifton Park could continue to serve the Victorian Landings development up there. And in fact, Clifton Park is essentially, you're feeding Victorian Landings before your tank right now, as if it were an extension of Clifton Park. So that's just a natural progression or possible progression of how this thing could work.
How much would it cost to go from, you said here to here is 1,000 feet, so would it be like 2,000 feet to go up to the Saratoga County Water Authority main or so?
Yes.
So would that be like, what, 500,000?
Yeah.
So could we hook up into that, use their water directly either as the main or the backup, and wait for Saratoga Water Services to come down and meet that?
That's certainly viable.
So
yes.
we could actually solve this problem for $500,000 and have two mains, and their water is like 40 THMs, roughly, both of them, right? And then until Saratoga Water Services come down, and then we could hook up directly, that could become our main, and those THMs are at like 5.
Right.
And then Clifton Park Water Authority, that would be the backup.
Yep.
And we wouldn't have to have the tank at all.
Again, I don't make the decision on whether DOH allows you to take the tank away, but my discussions with them have indicated that if you have two connections, that takes away some of the potential problem of a water main break. You'd be relying on storage that's in their system to strictly meet the storage requirement of the health department standards. But I think it's very viable.
Didn't you say that that those are high pressure lines? So
Yes, another element related to connecting to actually either Saratoga Water or Saratoga County Water Authority, and to some extent Clifton Park Water Authority. I think I mentioned the hydraulic grade line before. Picture this being the top of your tank. The pressure of the water coming from Saratoga Water Services or Saratoga County Water Authority is like 150 feet higher than that. So what you will need to do when you connect from either of those systems is provide a pressure reducing valve. That will reduce your system pressure so that the people in the low elevations of the village here don't have pressure that creates problems with their, a lot of times you have a problem with water heaters. The valves release and you have some problems. Now, if you think this through, those at higher pressure we could try to balance it so that we only increase pressure in the low areas a little bit, but also increase pressure on New York Ave, and then you could avoid the booster pump station. So, because right now you reduce pressure from Clifton Park from 70 psi to 25 psi, to use round numbers. So you've got all that extra potential pressure, you could increase the system, but if you're not careful with it, you're going to have to put PRVs, pressure reducing valves, in every house, which is not out of the question. It can happen. I think the health department might try to steer you away from that and maybe split the difference with the high elevation areas a little bit and just get them in 40 psi range instead of going up to 50 or 60, and then keep all the folks in the low area down, keep them under 100 psi.
This is a lot of information to take in, so I apologize if you're already explaining this, but so the other two connections, again, we don't have to have a tank. Why? Why do we have to have a tank with the Clifton Park, but we don't have to have a tank with the other two connections?
Good question to repeat so everyone understands. Right now you have one pipe that comes across the northway. It's fed by the grid of piping over in Clifton Park. If there's a water main break over there that shuts down that water system, if you didn't have a tank, this whole village would be out of water.
So
The tank provides John can shut off the valve that fills the tank, and you could have water for 5 or 6 days right now.
So it's a safety measure.
Absolutely. And it also, knowing the size of the pipes in your distribution system allows the fire flows to be delivered at a greater rate than if it all had just come through the pipe across the northway.
Right, and the other two connections,
I'm sorry. The other two, the other flip side of that is, if you have two connections, if there's a water main break in Clifton Park, the water still can be fed from Saratoga Water Authority or Saratoga Water Services, okay?
Okay, I misunderstood. When you were talking earlier, I thought I heard you say if we connected to one of these other ones, we wouldn't need the tank. But so if we have two connections other than Clifton Park, we don't need a tank.
One of them,
We need
Clifton
one
Park
other
plus
connection.
one, right?
You got one in Clifton Park now, and all you would need is another one,
One.
possibly in this
That's why
area.
no tank on the second. Okay.
No tank at all, right? You don't need it on the Clifton Park end either. You don't need a tank because, well, that's what I'm explaining.
What you need is redundancy, okay? You need whether it's a redundant pipe or one pipe and the tank provides the redundancy. Same as if you develop a well system, you don't want just one well, right? You know, there's a problem with that, you want a second one, and that is actually a state, it's not a nicety, it's a state requirement, you need redundancy.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't the obvious best option for health to connect to Lake North, because that would be 5 parts per billion or whatever it is, versus 40 parts per billion coming out of the tank on the hill, right? Which is the obvious goal.
The answer from the health department would be, both systems would be in compliance. They would say,
Well, wait.
both are acceptable.
Compliance is fine. I personally would much rather drink all 5 than 40, considering it can cause cancer. But the other part of the issue is that, in addition to that, Rob's plan will cut $500,000 off the cost, which is
$1 million.
$1 million off the cost, which is, in case anybody read this, is $155 a year increase to every one of us, which would be eliminated. And in addition to that, I understand, maybe I'm wrong on this, that the Department of Health or somebody, one of these nebulous government organizations, is going to cut the allowable parts per billion from 80 to 40 at some point, where they're considering it, right? Which would almost immediately render the tank on the top of the hill pretty much out of date the minute you can reactivate it. They made that the primary source, right?
I heard of that idea, and I did check with DOH, and they said that the stage 2 DBP regulations, which you're in now, are on the list for reassessment, and it's at least a 6-year period, probably closer to 10 or 15. And what they suggested is that the limits might not go down, and maybe more of other changes to the program. But essentially nobody knows at this point.
Yeah, but we don't want to get in the same situation that Bill brought up, where we're saying, oh, that's 6 years down the road, they might drop the limit, and then 6 years from now, all of a sudden it's 40, we put all this money into this option, and we're out of compliance again, we're sitting here 6 years from now with $1 million, $1.5 million down the drain, doing the same thing. It seems to me that connecting north is the obvious, maybe I'm wrong, very health-wise the best thing to do, and possibly financially.
I mean, to Saratoga Water Service.
Yeah.
I think, it's a very valid point. Regulations, I think I said earlier, the limits never go up. It may not go down to 40, but it might go from 80 to 60 or something, and I think we all understand what you're saying. But the one thing to keep in mind is that you're buying it from these huge systems, they're gonna have to be in compliance, and it's just the other side of the coin.
No, they're not in compliance now. According to this, they're not in compliance now, so I really don't.
No, Clifton Park Water Authority is definitely in compliance.
You said that we were the bottom end of the thing, they took care of the big customers and screwed the little guys.
Right,
That's what you said.
Those bigger systems.
Yes, so if they're not in compliance here, they just do put, that's what I thought I heard you say.
Clifton Park Water Authority is currently in compliance, so you have no case now to point to Clifton Park anymore. That was one of the things they talked about 4 or 5 years ago, was blame Clifton Park, but they were just saying, don't point to me, I'm buying it from them. And so, it was just, everyone's pointing the finger.
Mike, it seems to me, we had good water, we gave it away or sold it, and we're buying bad water for the same people we sold it to. Yeah, well, and now they won't need to pay.
As I said earlier, I would have been ridden out of town if I suggested to connect to that 4 years ago.
Mike, Matt also has, he found a report from CDC on the EPA possible plans to reduce the levels, so maybe Matt.
Oh, sure.
There was nothing set in stone, but they had a proposed level on the CDC website of a potential stage 3 where it could be 40 parts per billion. But again, nothing's been reviewed there. It's up for review, I think it was up for review last year, but it's been delayed for whatever reason, and there's a six-year review period. The other question I had, just to clarify, the $1.5 million is if you did every single thing on the wish list, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's if you did the mixing, the aeration, the granular activated carbon, the piping up the road. So the 1.5 million is what you're asking for to get the maximum funding from the state or federal
Try to get
authorities.
the most points.
But that's not what we're actually going to do in practice. We're not going
It
to
would
do
be
everything.
very unlikely
that you do everything.
You would do exactly that. You may do slightly different things that would accomplish the same goals and correct the same
We're hoping
problems.
we're going to get 60% of 1.5 million, and that would give us the dollars to play with to do what we wanted to do, which could be those things or could be a set of different things.
Right. And if you did not get funding, you'd have some choices to make based on results of pilot testing and such, that if the funding just wasn't there and nobody else was providing money for this, you'd have to decide, are you going to put money toward tank aeration, or are you just going to bite the bullet and go to granular activated carbon and just be done with it?
I'd rather take the seed money and put it into the lawsuit, because I think we're getting screwed on this all the way around.
Just a simple question. Clifton Park is in compliance, correct?
Correct.
And it becomes uncompliant when it goes from us to the tank.
Correct.
Why don't we shut off the tank, use the water, what's already there, it's a two-way tank, why don't we run it to the village, put in a backup for the tank there for when we do need it, it's there, or run it primarily to Clifton Park? That would seem to be, we're already there, it's cost effective, run it to us, treat the tank as needed when it's needed, and therefore we can save up to do this larger project, which is better for our health.
Yeah, somebody, I think, had mentioned that concept. I think you could sit there with a tank that is essentially non-potable water, or it'll lose its chlorine over time. You'll primarily feed off of Clifton Park. And it would be just there in case there was a fire, you would go and turn the valve, or you could put an automatic valve that would say, if the pressure dropped enough because of a fire, it could open up and...
I'm thinking long term, such as immediately now, hook it up, bring us into compliance now. Get our health where we need to be, bring us to where we
What
have
does it
to be.
say? Hook up to what?
Clifton Park, remove us from the tank and bring us into Clifton Park, we're already there. So just run all of our water off Clifton Park steadily as it is. And leave, bypass the
Just
tank.
bypass the tank, yes.
Leave the tank for emergency for now.
Yeah.
Propose our plan, put the budget in, do the funding, whatever we have to do to get our ducks in a row to do that massive project we need to do to get there.
I like that idea.
Yeah, and that's possible.
How safe is the water?
But if you alter your modification, or if you alter operation, it does, John, you know you have to, DOH has to give it its blessing.
But it gives us time. It gives us time to do what we need to do instead of, by Friday, this needs to be put in. So now we're having a massive meeting, we have 1 week to do this report, which obviously everyone's had more time to do it than we have. This is an immediate solution, to immediately bring us down where we need to be. Gives us into the DO Department of Health for our backup, so we still have it, we're still in compliance with everybody. Sit down, come up with a massive plan, and actually put a proper budget, proper applications, whatever we have to do. Run it up, do the haul, bring us up to that 4, be done with it. I mean, it is going to be a point where 40 is not going to be acceptable, 20 won't be acceptable. Just bring it there, get us to the 4. Hook it up now, get us in compliance, keep it where it needs to be. Long haul, get us projects that we got to do. Save us money too, because then we don't have to pay any more fees for these $100 when we're not going to pay it. It's right there.
All technically doable. The reality is, could be, fire department hears about this, and I guess, is anyone here from the fire department?
The chief was here.
I know he was.
I spoke with the chief about
Just
doing
different,
exactly this.
we just need to include everyone's input. Are they gonna, and they may be fine with it, knowing they gotta just go and open a valve. I mean, what do you think about that? Is that viable for
You
them?
could remotely do it. I mean, with 2017, I can turn my lights on from over in Europe. You can turn on a valve from the emergency.
Absolutely.
You said there was not.
You're good to go.
How much is that?
Couple $1,000 would be automatic.
Well, one of the problems you'd have is if you had all this water sitting in that tank and this water sat in that tank for a period of time, if you had automated or if you did it manually, either way, you open the valve up, there's a fire, you're now pumping, you're having contaminants going into the water. Way worse than anything you've even dreamed of. And now you got people drinking it. How do you alert the people quick enough? Now somebody gets sick, somebody dies, you've got a problem.
Excuse me, John.
Yes.
Can we just run a pipe out to the lake and pump it right out for the fire department?
For pump it to where?
The lake.
Pump it to where?
Into the village, into the hydrants.
Well, no, then you'd be pumping lake water into your water system.
No, pumping it into the fire.
They have dry hydrants, but we're talking about hooking up to hydrants. I mean, if you eliminated the fire department from hooking up to your hydrants, well, then you wouldn't have to worry about that.
Point of clarification, the hydrants are in the same water system as the drinking water we have.
Yes.
Yes. That plan will work. I may be a pessimist, but I think it'll be hard to get by DOH. And basically for the reasons that John has cited, they'll be concerned about a lot of things like that. But it's certainly an idea that came as a result of brainstorming and
Could you keep treating the tank? Could you keep treating the tank while you make a direct connection?
well, what we're doing right now, just and we'll update everyone, and this, I know this option has gotten a bad rap, but DOH has said that a tank mixer will help keep you could help keep you in compliance because you're very close right now. There's right now the electrical contractor's putting in a mixer this week. That mixer will hopefully keep you in compliance. Again, it doesn't satisfy the health concerns you have because, you know, I get it. If you're worried about 82, which is non-compliant, you're not going to be happy with 78. All right, I get that, but this mixer, the village had to do something to address this, and this mixer was something that the health department said, hey, I know, was it Queensbury or someplace a little farther up the Northway, put in one of these mixers. Believe me, I was poo-pooing it from day one. It's like, how's that going to work? What's that?
Still water?
No, somebody further up. This mixer may keep you in compliance and
Give us a wiggle room.
in fact, health department said the other day as I was talking, well, you know, the odd thing now is they are in compliance right now. Again, you're at 79 versus 80. So, you know, if you shutting the valve to the tank, feeding off of Clifton Park, you're not going to get down to 0. You might get down to 40 or 50. All right, and if that, you know, if that's appealing to folks, it may be worth asking the question.
Is it better for me to smoke inside here to contaminate your home, or is it better for me to smoke outside?
I catch you.
Unhealthy is unhealthy, but I don't want to be subjected to it. It is my choice. I'm paying for it. I don't want it. I would rather get us in compliant, get it planned, get it done. If we have to treat it, treat it. But I don't want to be paying extra money for good water when I'm already paying for good water.
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Just wondering, if you tapped into a well of our own, can we sell it to other communities? To be
Well, all right, and I've said this to a few folks. It seems to me that where you're heading with things and where Maltaville is, you're kind of connected, even though, you know, or you might be connected in terms of how people look to solve both of the problems. And I would think they could be someone you could sell water to, whether it was a well system. There might be an opportunity to sell water to Maltaville after you buy it from Saratoga County Water Authority. Because the issue with Saratoga County Water Authority is they're supposed to be just a wholesaler. They are selling bulk water to some entity, whether it's a village, a town, and then that entity distributes it to the customer. So in the case where you tied into Saratoga County Water Authority, I could see that you guys could end up being a retailer or reseller to them because they got no one else that's going to bat for them in terms of setting up an entity to sell water over there. Saratoga Water Services would be different. I think they would, if they ran a main down to you, or you ran a main up to connect to them, the way they normally operate is that main would be theirs, and they would retain the rights to sell to Maltaville. Because they essentially have a franchise.
But if we had a well,
If you're, back to your question was, well, yeah, if you need about 100 gallons a minute per well. So if you found 2 wells that were 150, 200 gallons a minute and had excess water, yes, you could, Maltaville's solution could be to send a water main to connect to you. So yes, that's possible.
What I'm trying to do is just, as ideas come out, like solutions, I want to kind of try to write them down so we don't lose them. So if you can help encapsulate, like the Clifton Park, I just want to write down ideas, potential solutions. We don't have to decide anything absolutely, but the other one was our own well, sell to Maltaville, and as we come up with ideas or solutions, at least write them down so we kind of can consider what we've been discussing. So just help me clarify that. Okay, go ahead.
What's the drawback to just going straight to carbon, granted activated carbon? Is it just that the change out of the carbon on a...
That's what,
because
even
that would
even DOH looks at that as almost a last resort.
But why, if it would get basically the levels down to, and it would solve the acetic acids that don't disappear through volatility?
That's where the importance of the pilot comes in, because you're getting...
That's 300,000-ish plus the running costs of replacing the carbon.
That's right. And, you need to know through that pilot testing how often this carbon needed to get replaced and regenerated, so...
But that would bring us well into compliance and probably give us as low a level,
right,
or in the ballpark of what SWS has.
Right.
Yep.
In the ballpark.
Yes, and what you do need to do after, because carbon filtration takes all the chlorine out, you do have to re-chlorinate after, but, it's like, oh, what are we doing? But, well, you're taking out all those precursors that create DBPs with the carbon as well, so.
Okay.
Jim.
Just going back to Maltaville, do you know how many people live over there? How many households?
About 90. About 90.
Small.
90 connections
90
or
connections.
people?
90 connections.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think I guesstimated they might use 25,000 gallons a day or something. Could you use like 30 or 40?
Between
37.
Yeah, so they might be around 20, so it's about half.
Not to sound stupid, what's Maltaville for 90 houses?
The other side around Lake. Other side of Route 9.
How many houses?
Oh, okay.
And up Route 9 a little bit is also considered that area.
Yeah, apparently, I don't know, I haven't worked with them directly. I was only involved when Saratoga Water Services was going to buy water from Saratoga County Water Authority and distribute it there to help fix that problem. But I don't know anything about how much water they need or anything.
This is a two-part question. The first one is, let's say everybody here picks one of these as a very nice option. What happens next? Does it go to the board?
I can try to answer, but maybe Gary's the better.
Or Paul. Yeah, it all has to be approved by the board. Yeah.
Approved by the board. I noticed there are 2 members of the board here. Are the other non-attending members of the board up to speed and agree that the 2 board members here are now? Do they know all this information?
I do not know. They shall.
We tell them.
And
We
we're
will be
video,
telling them.
yeah, and we're videotaping.
So we're videotaping and we'll force them to watch.
Urge them
Well-
to watch the tape.
Um,
Okay, so basically, this group then sends a recommendation, or whatever their thoughts to the board.
The board, I would say, I've not been on board very long, as you know, maybe 2 meetings, I think, 2 months. And what I see now is there's, generally speaking, with differences, there's an interest in seeing things happen, and right away, we talked about, could we do a committee with the public, and Jerry volunteered to run it. But the board as a whole, I forget if we had to have a vote or not, but we said, let's authorize having a committee that can adjunct things that can make some
Are they
recommendations.
gonna make that decision private, or are they gonna make it
No.
at a board meeting?
The board
The
doesn't make any
decision was,
decisions in
nothing was
private.
done in private unless it's a person.
Yeah, I'm just asking, I don't know.
Yeah, and we did make the decision to have a committee in public.
Yeah, because the public came forth and requested it, which was really great.
Yeah.
They were responsive and Gary.
And coincidentally, I wasn't at that meeting
Yeah,
and
you-
ended up.
Yeah.
But he told us.
That's how you
email
volunteer.
letters
Yeah, that's all
interested in
about
doing it.
Where our intention is, at least as the ad hoc committee, is that we want this to be as open and transparent as possible and always having a flow of communication. So if we bring anything to them, we want to be apprised of it. We want to help facilitate making sure people are in the loop.
Right.
So keeps evolving. It's not decided off in the corner. That's our intention, at least. So, in terms of other solutions too, I mean, open to other ideas.
This week, rain buckets.
Rain buckets. Go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little tired, but I have a little bit of a timing question. In our household, we're concerned about THMs in the shower and that kind of thing. We're looking right now about buying filters and so forth. I know they're going to come up with this, but that would be all superannuated by a solution the village came up with. We'd be spending money now that would be wasted in 2 years. So that's a consideration we have in our household about this, that if there are costs here, that's going to double the cost for any household who decides to put their own filters in, and then later on they won't need them. So that's a thought just to have people have in mind. Along those lines, I like your list, Denise, and is there a possibility of going through that list when we're done and saying how long it would take to get each one done? That's the rough ballpark figure.
Do it. One thing about the filters, and correct me if I'm wrong, but there are a lot of things that aren't sort of tested for, or things that filters can clear out. And how many, or is it 600?
There's 600 DVPs that are not regulated. And they're testing them, and they're coming up with other ones that they're not regulations for, that may be more carcinogenic or more toxic than the ones that are currently regulated. So we're going to filter our water no matter what, just because I think it's safe, but that's us.
Well, somebody mentioned, Bill mentioned Love Canal earlier, and I grew up in that era, so, I mean, I've always never trusted what comes out of a faucet.
Okay.
And we can get into, we have filter information later, and want to get a sense of how interested people are in finding out about information and stuff like that. But it's valid, and in terms of time frames, we could always address that. But does there anybody have any other ideas? We have the Clifton Park idea directly going to Clifton Park for now, which has 40 or 50 parts per billion, which is about half of what we have now. And go around the water tower, and somebody suggested maybe treating the water tower, and then plan to go to the Saratoga Water Services up Route 9, which has a level of like about 5 down the road in terms of timing development. The second one was use our own wells and sell to Maltaville, which has 90 connections. Yes.
Well, added to number one, I had suggested connecting with Saratoga County Water Authority as soon as possible. That would be the secondary connection. And then wait for Saratoga Water Services to come down.
Okay, so that'd be the secondary connection
Or
to,
the primary.
or primary to Clifton Park.
No,
With
it's
Clifton.
Saratoga County.
no Saratoga County is the
SCWA.
this is the Saratoga County Water Authority main,
Right.
and this is, so we'd have to run a line to here and wait for Saratoga Water Services to come down Route 9, then we can hook up with them and get their much better quality water.
Okay.
Mike, I have a question about the pilot. You mentioned pilot a couple times.
Yes.
Do you have, rough ballpark what the cost is, like what does a pilot project cost? You know, if you're gonna pilot, for instance, activated carbon,
I had a budget in the report of 15,000 for,
all pilot.
for the GAC pilot testing.
Okay.
The
And how long would it take to
pilot
get results on that, off that pilot?
Ideally, you would get going on that this summer, because you want to be able to do it. Historically, the peak DBP levels are the August test periods.
We'll be starting that by taking monthly readings,
Yes.
Right.
once the mixer gets in.
Exercise too.
Okay, so you're talking about pilot for the GAC?
Well, just any pilot, but yeah, specifically the GA.
Okay.
But Paul, I didn't know what, like, if it was gonna cost 100,000 to do a project or 10,000, so
It's
in that.
15.
Right,
In that-
you essentially buy kind of like like a water softener size filter, and
Yeah.
you put the GAC in that, and you just run an equivalent loading rate through that, and you do some testing, and
Okay.
probably over the course of a month or so.
Okay.
And the GACs are the same filters that we're basically using in our homes.
It's just an industrial
It's
level.
just an industrial level filter.
Right.
Got it.
Another possible idea, maybe crazy, but if we ended up with number 4, and we ended up hooking up with the Saratoga County, the yellow one, that's the Saratoga
Water services.
Water Services, I wonder if we had that hookup there. I see they have wells way up near to the north, they have wells off to the right of this map. Maybe we could look into them building well in our area and them funding it and we getting a discount, and they use the leftover, sort of like you have a windmill and you plug it into the power line. Maybe there's a way that they could find a water source here in our village and they pay for the wells. And it helps feed their system. We're getting water back from that system then, from all these sources, and we get reduced cost then.
Oh, interesting.
I had suggested considering kind of negotiating, consolidating with them and making a joint project,
Yeah.
but that would be one.
Is that
Yeah.
the same thing? Or are they two different ideas?
Well, there's many
Similar,
things
they're similar.
It's similar.
Gary, you're talking to them next.
Yes.
We're talking next week, yeah.
Yeah.
My guess is there'd be much more chance of the cost sharing on the pipe than them.
Right.
And they have a well field that's
Sufficient for them,
It's
right?
up south of
Right. If we
Saratoga.
cross the pipe, they'd be able to get water to Maltonville
right,
and these lower areas
right.
and have us part
But
of
yeah,
it.
share
Yeah.
Maltaville's problem is it's very expensive to get the infrastructure in, and there's only 90 people paying for it.
Yeah.
But if we
There are-
spread it out.
There are grants
Water district, I think.
that are good. There's going to be 2 more years of them, as I understand, that are intermunicipal grant program that could possibly work well for you in Maltaville. But it's the same deadline as what we're doing now, and it's just there's no possible way. I mean, you need agreements with them, and they're not even organized yet, as far as I know, to do a project. You have all the pieces and parts that are needed for the application, the bond resolution, all the authorization to move this thing forward. It may not hurt in the application if we write in Maltaville, potential future collaboration. You might get some bonus points, who the heck knows, but certainly in years to come, you can look at the same program, it's a cousin of this same program that is, it's only, I think it's 40% grant fund. So it's less grant funding, but it may help you pay a little more for things.
Okay. There's a gentleman back there.
I'm not sure if you can answer this question, but I'm just kind of curious what our rights are as residents as far as, our bills are expensive for water, right? We can all live into that. And I get my own, I'm on New York Avenue, so I have 2 issues. I have quality and pressure, okay? And I'm at the very end, so I get the worst pressure in the village. Can I put my own well in? And if I did, can I not pay the water bill?
I think it's easy for everyone to say, yeah, go, you know. I think the water system regulations probably prohibit it. If you have a water pipe, I don't know the village regulations.
I'm just curious what does, you know, I'm not.
Typical regulations prohibit connection of a well because they're worried about cross-contamination.
Well, I understand, I'm saying if I could put my own well and it's affordable, and I can eliminate this bill, cut off from the town, I don't want the water.
You have to put a septic tank in too, because you still need sewer.
Yeah, part of the bill is sewer.
I have sewer, I don't need sewer, right? I mean, you don't have that both.
That's part of my. Usually, what happens is you can put the well in, but you still have to pay the water bill for the infrastructure of
Why?
the.
I don't need that.
But, yeah, but because it's designed,
Well, I mean, people, let's
contributing.
let them answer.
I'm not, like I said, I mean, I don't know the regulations. I think that's something that we need to look at.
I would be curious to know that.
Well, I think we
because-
can note that question, and maybe like Gary and Paul or everything can try to find out some more information, maybe Johnny can help, whatever it is, we could take your information.
Personally, I'm more concerned with the pressure. I mean, I don't even drink the water, I just want my shower to work.
Yeah. No, I don't, I believe me, I'm not proposing this, but if everyone in New York Ave wanted to drill their own well and it eliminated the need to put in a booster station, maybe that could be considered, but again.
So I'm just curious whether that.
As you said, the system works with so many users, and it's, you know, if you drop off and 10 more people on New York Ave drop off, then everyone else here has to pay a little more, so that's the other side of the equation.
Everybody pays that, and then you pay for the water you use. If you had your own well, you wouldn't have to pay that, but you'd still have to pay the infrastructure.
Which is the majority of the bill.
That's true.
I think it was about 390 of my 400.
Bills are broken on that.
But, you know, we could find out, if you could give us your name afterwards, and we could try to find out your answer about the wells. If you could give us your name afterwards, and we could find out, see if we can get some answers for you, that's great.
I hear a lot of, complaining is not the right word, but concerns over the cost of the water bill. I work with a lot of communities about this size, and, you know, nobody likes it, but 600 is kind of an average. And you really can't compare yourself to Clifton Park because there's just so many users over there. Small systems that have done upgrade projects recently, this is what they pay because, you know, you guys are still paying off. I've got the amount
17
here.
years.
You're still paying off the project that was done 20 years ago. You know, there's quite a bit of debt service on that. You know, one thing you do have going for the village, and maybe this is a slippery slope, but you've got the two developments that are coming on to bring on new users. That if the costs in this project can be kept reasonable, you know, there could be limited increase in your bill. And if the project's really small, there could be no increase in your bill. It just depends on what you decide to do and prioritize as needed improvements. You know, you're concerned over the pressure. I don't know what I would do with 25 PSI.
Yeah, when you get these bills and you don't even get really adequate water, it's really annoying.
You can use my shower if you need to.
I mean,
You could sign up for now.
some water regulations, sometimes the health department, if it's booster pumps. Is there a regulation against booster pumps?
No, that I'm aware of. I'd have to look into it, but I'm not aware of that.
I mean, have you considered putting in a booster pump?
I've actually thought about that for my own house.
I don't want to have my own pumping system. I don't want to have a well attached to that pump and then I have everything. I mean, you need a tank.
I'm just telling you, like, in other communities where there are low pressures.
How about the village pays for it?
I can't make that decision.
You know what I'm saying? I don't want to pay $500 for something just to get normal water pressure, and then when the water, then power's out, I don't have the.
Right, then you have your current pressure is what you have.
It's not the option.
No.
Yeah.
A question about how this all works. You said that in a week from Friday, or this Friday, or Friday after, I forget, you're gonna be submitting something that apparently has pretty much already been approved by with the village board, is that correct? You have to submit a plan.
The plan of attack
Right.
developed a couple months ago was to submit the DWSR application, which we have. That was submitted right around March 1st, I think just before. The second part of that is when this next funding program was announced. It was not announced back at the beginning of the year. It came out in the spring of last year for the last round, so we expected it to come out sometime in April. The announcement wasn't made till just a few weeks ago. So when we talked about this with the board, it was when the water grant announcement came out, we were going to submit this because it's your best chance of getting the funding for this project.
Right, so here's just my question, simply, I understand that, and it's going in. If the board and the village wanted to go with 20's plant 1 or whatever, so ultimately we don't want to do the work on the tower, we want to bypass it or connect north. Does that ruin everything you're doing next week when you're submitting? Can we change what the plan is, in other words?
No, it does not. It does not ruin it because you're solving the same problem.
Okay, I just want to be clear.
And again, the importance of the line item of running a main up toward another connection, that checks the box for any of this.
So,
all right, so all you're doing is reallocating your budget
to
solve the problem.
Right, because there's no way we're going to come up with a different plan in the future. So I just want to make sure what we were doing wouldn't be ruined if.
Yeah, so the funding it's basically flexible.
That's what I meant.
Which is
it always has been. I'm doing another one of these where they're supposed to use an existing source. Due to reasons from DEC, we couldn't use that source. We had to go and drill wells. So that is just a change in project direction, all to solve the same problem. I guess that's all I can say about that.
Where would our money go to for the projects?
Where would it go?
When we make a decision, whatever, at the end result, whatever, how much money that dollar amount, who is that going to?
Who does it go to?
Yes. You're paying for the service, you're paying for whatever it might be, pipe or bypass, who knows what our end result is? Where does our approved budget, where does that dollar go to? Who are we paying to fix our issue?
It's a combination of vendors that the village will contract with. First of all, I would hope that the village would have me engineer the project for you, but there also could be, if wells are looked at, it could be the hydrogeologist. You know, I would design the project. There might be a hydrogeologist involved if you go the well option. I would take his information and design a well house and the connection piping. We'd put the job out to bid. We'd, you know, probably have a separate contract for running the pipe up to either of the connections, and those would be put out to bid, and those would go to, you know, we'd have to bid it out, and we'd go to the lowest responsible bidder. And, you know, maybe I'm not answering your question, but that's.
For the most part, I just want to make sure that it's not going, I don't want to make sure the decisions being influenced by someone who can benefit from this project. I don't want a large project that's unnecessary because someone's going to benefit from that maximum dollar amount when we can do it for less from someone who's not, you know, I don't want that to be our deciding factor. It's like, well, I kind of want it to go because, you know, this is my paycheck. I don't want that word to be just like.
No. In fact, that's why I've stated that if the funding doesn't come, we can do something as simple. We're already putting the mixer in, which is step one of that 3-part aeration process. It's only $15,000. It's not you know, all right, only 15. It's $15,000.
It's being outsourced, bid, a little bit. I mean, that's.
Yeah, so we've done it. Brunswick Electric got the bid. You know, again, if we the funding does not come through, we can just look at the lowest cost option that is the most palatable to everyone. And you know, the cost projections on, I think, are attached to your agenda. I'll talk about how much the village is going to borrow and what that impact is going to be. I think the loan amount on the $1.5+ million project was it somewhere in the 600 or 700,000 range. You know, that's kind of seen as the top end, and as we've discussed, it's got a few extra items that, you know, kind of could be described as wish list items, but are would fully be embraced by DOH in terms of approving the project. So if you wanted to spend your 40% and do them, DOH would say, great, go for it, it'll help your system. So, but on the other end, we could go as small as need be to make it comfortable for the taxpayers.
So I know it's getting late, so we don't want to hold you too much longer. What we want to encourage you, you know, there's a lot that we're digesting right now, and that's why we're videotaping this too. You may come up with some ideas after we walk out the door from having conversations with people, whatever that is, something formulates. We want to hear about it, okay? It's not like you walk out the door and this is the end. So we want to appreciate Mike going through this section and really taking the time to answer a lot of questions. I thought some really good ideas were generated. And the other things we want to just touch on, because I want to make sure that you guys get out of here, is that first of all, we have some information on filters. I just did some preliminary information on some different filter scenarios. And I'm just curious, you don't have to raise your hand obviously, but we're just kind of curious if anybody in this room is interested in finding out about filter prices. Okay, so we have a few people, okay. Let's say, you know, a little bit less than 10, about 10, okay. And some people may have already gotten their filters, some people may not be interested, but I can just tell you that I don't want to go through all of this and take up people's time right now, but we can answer questions after the formal meeting. I can hang out and answer questions about that. We can also take questions through email or whatever other avenues you want to do in terms of approaching us. We tried to get some prices that you could get through regular stores and also bulk prices through some companies which generally would be online. And some companies offer just a faucet mount filter, some offer faucet and shower, and one of them offers faucet, shower, and bath ball, which is really ideal, I would say, but there may be more out there. These are just examples of companies, and we've got some prices, bulk prices for like 25 filters and then maybe 50 filters, and we have to see how much of an interest is if we're actually going to be able to get a bulk filter price. It's not like it's going to be a ginormous cut in cost, but maybe around $10 or something. But we can talk about that more further as we get a sense of things, and please let us know if you're interested. So that information is in this packet as well. And I guess I would say, lastly, just a couple other things too, is that we are going to have a follow-up community meeting in October and maybe perhaps earlier, depending on what we find out, but after the testing is done in the summer and kind of getting a sense of things. And it may be sooner depending on how much information we get about these solutions or figuring out how best to get the information out. And as I said on the bottom here, submit your questions, ideas, and comments either to the village office or send it to our email, which is here, and or whatever way you want to. And I would say lastly, there's another room for discussion, and I know that people may have to leave or may not want to hang out for that, but
yeah, I just wanted to say one thing. If we do not have your email address, please make sure that we have it so that we can keep you updated on things.
Yeah. And so we're here to sort of answer this in terms of having a little bit less structured around just specific to Mike's questions. There may be other comments or concerns or questions or ideas that we haven't covered yet. You haven't felt like you've been able to say what you needed to say, or ask what you needed to ask. And we want to make sure we have a forum for that. And we realize some people may not be able to hang out for that, but we want to make sure that we give you that opportunity at this point. So we can help out in terms of answering if we can, and if we can't, we definitely want to get your questions or concerns and write them down and make sure we have your contact information and follow up on it. and provide the answers.
Here's just one question, please. These filters that you're talking about, that go to each house, I guess?
Yes.
Do they take care of the problem?
Yeah, yes, they do. They're
They're
the smaller version of those large industrial ones that are part of the plan that they might put in.
Okay.
So it lowers it down to like practically zero. What?
Okay.
Non-detect, they call it. And there are different avenues in which you can be impacted by these THMs. There are 4 of them, and some impact you in one way, some in another.
What is the range? Price range?
The what?
Price range.
Well, it kind of depends. It's on your sheet, and
I don't have my glasses.
that's okay. I have everything from just a countertop filter for your sink, and believe me, this is stuff you can look up. You might get better prices, but you get the mount for the sink plus a 4-pack filter, $62.98. That's just for the sink.
One filter where the water comes into the house and takes care of all those things.
That's a whole
No,
house.
that's a whole house filter.
That's expensive.
$1,000 for a whole house filter. It's different than just
I
having.
know it sounds like a great deal. Let's get the money up and give me $1,000 instead of spending $500,000, $1 million.
Well, then you have to filters continuing.
Yeah, then it only lasts a couple of months to filter.
Well, no, it depends on the filter. It can range from 2 to 3 months up to about 6 months. To be completed.
Jump the filter, $1,000.
Well, no, just the filter, not the whole system.
The initial installation costs about $1,000, and then there's a recurring cost every few months, depending on what brand you have. For the filter
That's for the whole house. You can get it independently just for shower, sink,
No, I
and
guarantee
bath.
you you're gonna get it in all the water. Let's get it straight.
Well, there's 343 hookups, so if you figure 1,000 times 343, that's
Sure
300.
beats $1 million.
Plus the recurring cost, you'd be over $1 million pretty quick.
And one of the things I guess I'm
We
gathering.
looked at it, Bill.
Plus liability, yeah, there's a lot of,
We did look at it.
we did run the numbers.
Yeah, and there's pros and cons to it, because then you have to make sure everybody, first of all, you have to get kind of a unanimous decision by the village.
Get
because
that
it would be-
100% right.
Yeah, because the village has to approve, the residents have to approve funding for something like this. But then sometimes there are issues around bacteria, because you have to make sure that residents replace their filters when they're supposed to, or you get into problems with bacteria.
Plus the cost of the filters would actually, from what I saw, equal about what the increase in the water bill would be for borrowing money. So
Right.
it doesn't make much difference.
And the village would have to go and service these things in everyone's homes. Why there'd be costs for wages and things.
Or-
We looked into the lawyer, the village would be responsible. If the village's solution is to put filters in each house rather than cleaning up the water that's coming in, the village is gonna be responsible for it, which means everybody's responsible. So it's not like, well, let the village pay for the problem and each person will get fixed. No, everyone will have to pay one way or the other. So it seems like it's not a good long-term solution. But just,
I had a question for Mike, because you said something which I moved into Victoria Landings up there, and now we're talking about filters. Did you say that the water comes through up there and then goes into the tank? So does that mean I need a filter or not at this moment?
You're essentially drinking Clifton Park water at
Your water's
40
better.
or 50.
45.
So you guys can come on up now.
Can sell your water.
Yeah, you sell your water to us.
We'll put a hose.
Okay, Rob, go ahead.
Thank you.
I do think, and I asked the board this, I do think though, in the interim, till we get better water, that I was asking the board to purchase in bulk filters, and I believe that can be done. There's different ways to do it. I don't believe that when the attorney says it's going to be a gift, that's not true. I'd like to see the board purchase filters, and whether we have people buy them from the village at bulk price or at a reduced price. Considering all of the difficulties that people have had to go through, I think that would be a reasonable assistance to people. But that would only be an interim thing until we get better quality water. Hopefully that could be taken care of within a couple of years.
I mean, I don't know totally. I mean, I heard some legal stuff, but some people had volunteered to actually install people's filters, so they were just looking to get like where they could just purchase it from the village could purchase it for them, and then you would just take the filters and put them in themselves. So, I mean, logistically, I don't know, there's different opinions on that and legal opinions, but I can understand people, realistically, you're paying for water, and then you have to pay out of your own pocket, additionally for filters. And either way, I understand you're gonna have to pay for it, because if we vote to pay for it, then it's gonna come out of our pockets too. It's just a frustrating thing to have that additional cost, no matter which way you look at it.
If we put in the granulate activated carbon, though, we're effectively giving filters to the entire village.
Right, exactly.
That's effectively doing filters. So therefore, everybody doesn't have to, you could probably still filter your water if you really, really wanted to, but you're effectively giving everybody a filter by doing that.
Yeah.
Matt, remind me when that might happen?
Well, we would have, the board.
Back to your question about the time frame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for turning the valve off and just shutting the tank off, I mean, any project, you know, it's gonna take 18 months to 2 years. And that's after you've been funded, or at the point at which the village says go, regardless of funding.
What's the funding timeline for grant money?
The awards or decisions made on the last round of water grants, you might get a notice sometime in September.
Okay. Does the additional money that, there was a press alert that went out that Cuomo added more money for water in New York State, is that part of that grant process? Or?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So how long would it take to do my proposed idea?
Shutting the valve?
To bypassing the tank and just hooking us to the village and using the tank as a reservoir to treat it? How long would that take, essentially?
That's the time that would take, is the time it would take to get approval from DOH.
So almost immediately.
And funding for the valves and things like that.
So
And
basically, we
funding.
could have it done by the end of the summer versus over 2 years.
Yeah, and you know, there might be a way to try to work that in as a trial, and then during that time, do your fire flow testing. You know, there could be a creative way to get what you want under the guise of something temporary.
Didn't we effectively do that a year or two ago?
Effectively.
Yeah, when we painted the tank, yes.
Right.
I think that sounds like a great interim solution. We should have a long-range plan, which
Exactly.
perhaps by putting up exactly. But I personally think it's something we should look at soon.
I don't think immediately 2 years any day.
Right, because I think that would take a lot more than, even if we end up doing something that takes 18 months, we can still temporarily be using the water without going. So, but I don't know, we'll have to take that up, I guess, before.
The question that was asked that I don't think has been answered yet is that, is there a way to continuously treat the water in the tank so that it doesn't build up with bacteria?
In other words, will we circumvent it?
That's the spray aeration. That is the treatment.
I mean, do what we're doing right now, so that it's not, so that you can, in other words, bypass as suggested soon rather than later. And in the interim, so we go to another one, we keep treating the water in the tank. So I don't know if you keep emptying it out, where.
Yeah, it becomes
You chlorinate the water
real
that goes
hassle
into
for
the
the
tank, right?
operator.
Mix it, chlorinated, tested, washing it.
Well, we're doing that now
Right,
already.
but that would be less expensive.
But we're doing that
So
already.
we figure out.
The solution that I think a lot of people say is the obvious one is to do the spray aeration. But again, there is the question of how effective it will be with the haloacetic acid. So I think there's no doubt you'll get an immediate improvement on some of the items of concern. The problem with that is that costs about $100,000 to do that. You know, there's electrical upgrades that are needed. The equipment itself is in the $50,000 or $60,000 range. By the time you put it out to bid, it's $100,000. So it's a whole different ball of wax than this mixer we put in, you know, which might get you in compliance, but it's not going to be low enough to make anyone happy. It just may.
Well, that's in our grant application.
So when are you gonna know with this mixer whether it's helping or not?
Over the
It's
summer.
scheduled to be done in a couple of weeks, and then instead of quarterly, the committee decided to do monthly.
We're doing it monthly over the summer, so and that's the reason behind an October reconvening, so that we would have some data to see what the mixing potentially does to the levels.
And would you expect this mixing then to have kind of decrease over time? I mean, obviously
Yeah,
it's
you
going to
would.
be higher now, you're gonna start mixing it, you would expect it to slowly decrease if it's gonna work at all.
Well, right now, if you put the mixer in tomorrow and you got a low reading, you'd have to take it as a false,
Yeah, right.
it's just because now historically is not a very high time of the year. So you'd have to really wait till August and see how the results
Think
fare.
3 readings would be better than 1, because now we have 3 data points to
Right.
see it. Is it
Right.
just a one-off, or is it a trend towards,
That's what I was getting.
yeah?
Okay, Bob, you have a question?
And how would those results be published to the residents?
If you have email, you'll get them.
And we can post them on
Do we
other
have to
avenues,
submit
and
those?
there are about 50 residents that don't have email or
Not
on
the monthly.
Facebook, that kind of thing. And so we would make sure we try to get that to them as well. We want to make sure everybody gets the
Yes.
information.
Monthly?
Potentially, we could do it monthly, yeah.
We have your email address,
Yeah,
it's easy.
it's pretty
Yeah.
easy. Okay, is there anything else?
Yeah, what would be a ballpark cost for the valves required to bypass the tank? Because that would
If
have
the
to,
health department let you do it manually, $0. If you had to retrofit that vault, and it may have originally been set up to have an altitude valve in it, do you think?
Yeah, as far as under the tank,
Yeah.
you'd have to cover it.
Depends with the piping arrangement, because that, the valves might be in the $5,000 range because it's a special hydraulic valve. How much more for the installation depends on what's there.
in terms of short-term solution, if it's a substantial amount of money, we'd have to figure out where that money comes from, because the
Right.
funding wouldn't kick in for a while.
Again, because of the readiness of what the board has done, whether folks like it or not, the board has the ability to take out a bond anticipation note, which is, effectively authorization to borrow some money to move some of these things forward, whether it's pilot testing, whether it's getting approval and implementing this valve idea, or doing a groundwater evaluation. I mean, these things can all.
But is that in anticipation of getting the grant funding, or is it?
It's in anticipation of closing on a long-term loan. If you never get a grant, you could still end up with a loan, a 30-year loan at 3%, 4%, whatever the current market rate is. So that's what the bond anticipation note does, is get you cash flow so that you can do stuff before you close the long-term loan.
If it was a $5,000 rough, then, they could do a one-off water surcharge, couldn't you, for $10 a resident or $15 a resident? Would that be possible for
I
the
don't
village to do? If it was something like that, as a temporary house.
You could borrow
To do a one-off, to do a
The
one-off.
other mechanism is you can borrow from another account,
Yeah,
and then you're already in the process to close on a short-term loan for a water project. That could get you short-term money at like little over 1%. So you could just borrow from yourself until that closes, and then just get the less expensive short-term money from EFC, the funding agency.
correct me, hasn't DOH already said we can't bypass the tank though? Was I mistaken with that?
Well, originally that was way back, but I don't think that's necessarily true now. They said that it's up to the engineer to come up with a solution. They're amenable to alternative solutions, including bypassing.
Yeah, the bottom line is you can't call them up and say, can I turn the valve, can I shut the tank off? They need an engineer to write a letter, a plan, they need to look at it, think about it, and approve it. Is what has to happen. It's just the way it works. It's.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so I appreciate it, everybody, for coming out and hanging in there.
Thanks, Mike.
This is really great. Thank you, Mike. All right.
So I guess we're adjourned?
We're adjourned. I should have checked with you. I'm sorry. I'm just sitting there going, wow, they're hanging in here.
Yeah, really.
I'm impressed.
That's why I asked you about
I'm impressed. People were very interested. That was good. That was very good, you guys. Way to go. Thank you. This is a team effort here. Yeah.
I think so. Gary forwarded
3 or 4.
The best way to be. No, I got them all, and
basically us with the board recommend the best that we think to have some sort of people can rank. Thank you for your questions. Appreciate it. You know what I'm saying? Like in terms of like if you came up with like say a top 3 and had people rank them in
In a
their
perfect
preference,
world,
1, 2, 3, and to go with the will of the people, or is it the committee? Yeah.
I was telling the board
That it's not binding. Yeah.
They've been on vacation.
Oh, where are you going?
They lost it for, and actually, Larry is actually working on the favor.
There was some concern. Things to think about, you know.
They're now getting close to the striking distance, so their delay actually is beneficial to us. A secondary benefit.
well, you know what though? It's the communities that don't do anything forever. They're the ones where everything's about ready to fall apart. And they can get funded.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, because you have only really a 20-year-old
I did miss pub trip.
system.
That was yeah, priority. Yeah.
Situation that is necessary.
I gotta run,
Yeah.
I'm going on vacation, and we'll get to the weekend, I'll be Boston, Saturday at home.
Yeah. The more I feel like my personal, the more I think about it, the more I'd like to just go to carbon and just like because I feel like I feel like the number one solution is the West, but it's the most expensive. I mean, even if you do even if it came all the way to Gulf Road, it still would cost $175,000. And we still don't.
That solves immediate problems.
We still don't solve it.
Maybe it can't be
bypassed it.
Certainly, I think